Oh, welcome to another edition of What the Fuck Happenings here. This consciousness thing. The one that was from Inmendham, yes. Or from Mendham. Anyway, now here. Something. In some other place. Which is sort of a joke I heard that I never heard before. A saying. Thing that's supposed to be funny-ish. That whole whatever, the electricity's on but the lights are out, or this whole idea of changing, usually for the worst. But I heard the factory's still there, but it's making something different. So that was pretty, a funny way of saying it. Maybe go. Don't do that too often anymore. Which is sort of the point, is that we go through our lives and we just become all these different people every couple of weeks. You've sort of changed in some way. So you could come up with lots of analogies for the fact that you're rusting. You're interacting with the other molecules, and it's it's corroding you, taking you over. Even you could almost make analogies to our society, in the sense that it's mixing with the chemicals of the world, and they're corroding it, frankly. It's not getting better. The whole idiocracy thing, and it's the lowest common denominator is getting lower and lower and lower. It's just we're capable of being so much more intelligent, and yet we're becoming dumber, in a sense, because the people who are raising kids are dumber. The society that's organizing our existence, providing us our civilization, those people are getting dumber and sillier. The government employees are not upping their game any. They're not playing the real game. They're playing the "we're a union, fuck you" game, and that game don't work. It only works getting people out of trouble. It doesn't stop them from making more messes and more trouble. In the sense that, well, I've sort of made this point before. I'm just saying unions were very valuable when you're under the thumb of the exploitanists. But once you are free, of the thumb, unions just become another arrogant thumb. They're just a menace, because they're not fighting for fairness anymore. They're just fighting to keep their advantage and to control the world and all that kind of stuff. They just become a maniacal, evil force. But anyway, defending their, doesn't matter what crime the school teacher commits anymore, right? I mean, they could be, they could be the perpetrator of a school shooting, and they still would get all the tolerance in the world. Zero tolerance for everything except misbehavior by teachers, mistakes. It's just so silly. Anyway, I mean, the world's just so silly. So I thought pictures of chaos would be, maybe a theme to work with. But there is no such thing as chaos, and so that's really the underlying point, is there's no such thing as chaos. It's all, you can pour ink into something, and theoretically you could pull it all back by just imposing a controlled opposite force, and blah blah blah. And it's all this stuff is, in a sense, predictable, no matter how bizarre and silly it looks. It's made of real interactions, and they can be understood as mechanisms, and as reoccurring patterns. That's what our brains are good at, is identifying the patterns. And most of the chaos, you might argue, does have correlation. It's the whole idea of parenting or anything else. It's a controllable experiment, but it just requires knowledge. If you want to make something, you have to have enough knowledge of how to make it. or you have to get lucky. Obviously, some people just get lucky, I would imagine, in the sense that they want their kid to be something and they just do a few things and it just turns out, and they win. But yeah, most of the time, you need a little bit of understanding of a whole bunch of psychological gibberish in terms of understanding at least simple concepts like conditioning and the fact that you need to create a mechanism in something where the rewards and punishments are in the right places, so they fear the right thing and aspire to be the right thing, and all of this kind of mush. But that's all that makes us. We're all just running to our addictions and from our fears, and our fears and our addictions are so appears to be a kind of a chaotic mix, but you can trace it all. You can figure out why you are the asshole that you are in a lot of respects. You can tie the pieces together and understand the whatever you want to call it. I can't. It's just this aging thing. It's really rust. You really do. The parts break down, and they're not as well, whatever. And yes, I can't even analogize a metaphor. I can't. Well, anyway, I can't even construct metaphors out of vocabulary and cliches. I can't even remember the cliches about not remembering. Stuff that you lose. But those ink blot things, whatever they're called. But anyway, so it's most of what people do. They pick the wrong part of understanding it is you can understand it in ways that are only superficial, and so you don't get to the real core of the problem. It's like you could have train tracks that are crossed and crisscrossed and all this kind of stuff, but the real problem was that the trains were falling off the track because it's on a hill, and you're not realizing, oh, it's on a hill. That's the problem, and it's turning while it's sloped the wrong way. That won't work. And that's the underlying problem. But all this other structure confuses you, and so you think, well, we get rid of these tracks going sideways, that'll fix the problem. And you've misidentified the core of it. So anyway, this whole anti-natalism thing, the whole idea of having this conversation. First, it's in the context, as I've stated before, that most people who are educated are already performing as if they understood. They're already vegetarians, so to speak. They could still have no regard for animals, and yet they're behaving as if they did. And so most people, although they have no sympathy with the idea that making humans is a bad thing, making any living thing is a bad thing, they still behave as if they believed it. So in that sense, we've already won the argument, because most of the people who are educated aren't a problem. And it's just the huddled masses, the dirty people, with brains that have been raised in garbage dumps and shitholes and whatever, haven't had every advantage. Who are still the animals? They're still thinking in terms like an animal. They're just, I gotta survive, I gotta win, I gotta get mine, I gotta play the game. I gotta keep up with the Joneses. We gotta have our share of machines and this and that and whatever. Their hunger has blinded them to any kind of notion of any responsibility in how they eat, and so they're very dangerous animals when set free. When allowed to be free, they'll just eat everything, because they just don't have enough knowledge. And that's all it is. And so then you get into the whole subject too of just what's the nature of our intelligence and where did we get it from, and even stories that simple, ones that aren't covered in chaos, in terms of it's an understandable history, how we got from there to here. And people can't even get that story right, because they somehow think our brain did something miraculously different, in some big way. Like we got bigger brains, or we got something, when all we got was language, and that was the key to intelligence, was having enough brain resources devoted to the purpose of communicating and making words. That's the only way you can communicate, is you have to first make the words. And so that was a little switch you turn in a brain, where you just change what your memory space is being allocated to, with the resources of your computer. It's just optimizing the function in terms of allowing this bigger function of doing a lot of this thinking stuff rather than this impulsive reacting thing. So it just makes it possible to have a much deeper reaction to existence, or an impulse, or to a feeling, or to a sensation. And that's the nature of it. And so we have this advantage where we have the resource, the mental resource, to do this deep thinking, and in a sense deep understanding, in the sense that we can put a bunch of the knowledge someplace else so we don't have to remember it all, and access it easily. Even just the whole idea of the internet is a great resource for that kind of thing, but it's all been turned into, what is the idiocracy turning it into, is just a mechanism to sell products, propagandize, to have the undeep conversation. There's more undeep, unthoughtful, unsophisticated interaction going on the internet than what it started as, which was this library of access to all this university type information. Very, very productive. It's in its beginning, and it's turning into something that's just pictures and bullshit. But anyway, and I could get into the evils of giving it away to Google. I just noticed something that was kind of funny. There's no print copy of like really important books in science. Faraday wrote books, and you can't get a copy on the internet. You can't. There's no copy, and all you can get is at best is some half Google thing, where Google has actually Xeroxed or whatever, scanned the physical text of the book, without turning it into text. I'm sure they've turned it into text, but they don't give you any access to that either. But yeah, it just surprises me. I mean, Faraday, very famous person. Maxwell, very famous. And there's a bunch of his writing that you can't get on the internet. It's like, it's crazy. It's long dead. I mean, there can't be a copyright issue. What the hell's going on? I mean, doesn't make any sense. So anyway, just pointing out. And then even audiobooks, it's not there. And these are like fundamental things that just, some of the first books you got to put into the record are these ones that are, of a scientific nature. But anyway, just something I noticed. Another failure of the internet. But I've also noticed that things have just disappeared. You now have to go back to that Wayback Machine to actually find references to some material, and you're saying it should be there. I mean, exact quotes from text, from things that were on the internet 5 years ago. They're probably still on the internet, but Google doesn't index it, because Google doesn't index the internet anymore. It's a service provider. It has its own interests and its own will to force you to go shopping. I mean, even that, little stuff like that, 10 years ago, the internet wouldn't have tolerated this behavior by a vital part of the function of the internet. Search engines. I mean, if they started putting shopping sections up first on the search page, I mean, that would have been like, what the fuck? You can't do that. And so, the whole thing's turned to shit. And that's the nature of our current civilization's chaos, is the fact that there's no controlling mechanism, no controlling themes. Constitutional principles don't mean anything anymore. You just words from the past. Fuck it. Not even the words, but just the underlying principles don't even mean anything. If they wrote a bunch of crap, like, well, look, they did this with the, just because I'll bring it up because it's a little personal issue with me. I'm not against guns. I'm not for laws against them. I'm just for a conversation about how guns aren't a great thing, and that individuals who think they can do this private police force thing, that won't work. Okay, you have to invest in civilization, and the investment is some trust and the fact that you have to know in the long run. It's like wearing seatbelts. You have to know in the long run it's a good idea. It might not be in your short-term interest, might not be in your personal interest, but in the long run it's in everybody's interest. And you have to kind of understand that that's sort of what the gun thing is, that you don't want all these wackos with guns. Maybe you don't think you're a wacko. Well, fine. Just understand that you can't have it both ways. You can't just point your finger superficially and call them crazy and assume that you're just fine. You can't play the game that way. But anyway, the point is the Second Amendment has this whole thing about, it has all this writing. The words are written there. It qualifies the right to own and bear arms. I mean, it's a qualified right. I mean, by a bunch of crap about, hey, right now we don't have an army, and right now we don't even have barely police forces. So yeah, you got to do it yourself. But maybe in the future that won't be a problem. But right now it is a problem. So yeah, you got to have a gun, because we can't defend ourselves from the whatever's coming without them. And then, so they qualified the statement so clearly, and yet everybody just think, no, this doesn't matter. Even though none of the other amendments have all those qualifications in them, none of them are as long and as, yet people just ignore it. Like pretend it just weren't words stated, that it wasn't in there for a reason. It was to qualify the right, to say, well, look, it's a right, but it's not a right that's like forever. There certainly might be a time where, we're advanced enough where we don't have to have a bunch of civilians walking around with, shotguns over their shoulder. But anyway, I digress. But all of these subjects are just, and then people are just so devoted. They're so passionate over their one little piece of the chaos that they think they figured out. Whether it be their meat eating or their guns or their white is right or whatever the fuck it is. And it's just so stupid because it's not a big picture thing. It's not you can't get to the future from those places. Because they're irrational positions in the first place, and they're almost a concession that you humans are just too incapable of doing civilization. You're just not willing to give away anything. You're not willing to sacrifice any of your personal bullshit to some understanding that your preferences don't mean much. They're just a little personal neuroses that you have, that blue is the best color, or whatever it is. And that's just your horse shit, your little moody, putsy little perspective. Oh, this is so meaningful. Like, you could just go through these images and, each one to each person will be saying something like, well, this is too hostile. I don't like it. It's too aggressive. This is too crude and sloppy. I mean, every single person is going to have some opinion. Oh, this is just too, it's all kind of blended in. It's a little too Van Gogh-y, too lazy. And people just have these opinions. And these opinions don't mean anything. This subjective crap doesn't really mean anything. They're not based on any kind of any evidence that any of these whatever you call them, aversions, attraction and repulsions, have anything to do with the underlying function, which is, you need to not make a mess. You need to be somewhat productive in your life, and you're not the only part of the story, okay, of your life. Your life is more than just what did I get out of it, what was in it for me, and what did I take out of it. It's a lot more complicated than that, in the sense that no, everything you take was somebody else's. You could almost make an argument for anti-natalism by just telling somebody, well, what do you think their kids are going to do except take your kid's job? You could just make arguments like, well, if you give everybody else the right to breed, well, their kids are going to take your kids' jobs. And even understand in your own circumstance that if I had kids, right, my kids would be doing something in the world, right? And that means that somebody else isn't doing that because my kids are going to be doing it. That kind of basic logic. But it's basic. It doesn't really get to the whole picture. It doesn't tell the whole story of what creates productivity in terms of a system, that makes more, builds more than it tears down. Does more building than demolition. So anyway, so all of this is just a conversation about, well, what's, the more you think, the more knowledge you have of problem solving or puzzle fixing or figuring out how things flow together, the more knowledge you're going to have about how we just function on psychology. That it doesn't have anything to do with what's really valuable and what's really not, in the sense that I would argue that all value has its origin, which we can dissect, is just in the sense of what's the sensation. I mean, whether we have tentacles and we're some disgusting alien creature, doesn't matter if they're sitting in a comfy chair, watching porn, drinking beer or something, just having a nice time. Well, yeah, that's great. That's you've achieved the objective, which is to have this thing called a peace of mind, or to have a pleased and engaged and whatever. Something's having fun, however you want to describe that. I mean, there's a kind of a tricky word to define, a concept to define, but it's just this idea of not being unhappy or sad or miserable or in torment, and that's really the objective. So this little picture there of the big wave of chaos coming, it's and that's really our circumstance. But like I said, we do have this faculty of intelligence, so we can understand where some of the chaos comes from. And I would argue that it comes from this ignorance. Is our biggest enemy, and the fact that people knee-jerk react. The neocons, just kill, like they're going to solve the problem, with a cruise missile. It's just, it's really stupid. You can't kill ideologies that way. Just because of this idea that everything is connected now. I mean, in the past, everything was regional. People were regional. If you hated the Methodists or something, well, they all lived in one place, so go kill them all, and then there's no more Methodists. That kind of thing. You didn't have to worry about the fact that the ideology was spread all over the world, and you can't kill it. That kind of thing. And there's consequences to all this stuff. Like I said, everybody you kill, if they have kids or family, then they're going to be orphaned, and they're going to hate, and blah blah blah. And you just don't win that way. Is just create another generation motivated by revenge. But anyway, see, these are all things you got to figure out. That this system doesn't react. This chaos blob doesn't react to violence very well. You put violence in, you get violence back. So that's part of this whole thing of understanding which are valuable weapons. And yeah, whatever this is, that's it's a weapon. It's quite a mound there. Just anyway, distracting. And that's part of what you do with your intelligence is recognize, oh, I'm very distractible. Little things, and just they jump out at you. They stick on everything. Everything has this, as I was saying before, everything has this reactivity to it. And every person, the reactivity is different. But you could say there's generalities. Like some images, like this one, this image never makes anybody kill somebody. In some images, oh yeah, this definitely makes somebody kill somebody. That they do have there is some objectiveness to be gleaned out of basic concepts. That the color red, because of blood and other things, is associated with violence and aggression and all that kind of stuff. And so that's a piece of the chaos we can understand. We can understand red. Okay, don't paint guns red. Yeah, that's a good idea. Never paint a gun red. Bad idea. More likely to be used. That kind of thing. So there's some skills that we can gain out of this, some control mechanisms, some power that we can use our brains to recognize what's controlling us. We can, even though we're in the Borg, we're a biological organism, hungry, horny, sensitive, vulnerable. We can understand all that, and that gives us power against the Borg. So even though we're in the Borg, we can, we're not so controlled that we can't step above it, that we can't crawl the walls of the maze and understand what's trapping us and what's controlling us, and the parts that we should try to minimize in terms of their control over our thought process. The petty little crap that doesn't have anything to do with anything real, just has to do with what we personally like. And that's the danger, is that we just can't view a future world in some form that just doesn't seem to meet our aesthetics. It's as if you could make the argument that you could take the ugliest person on earth and the prettiest person on earth, and somebody could suggest cloning them into a giant, huge, billions of them, and clearly our subjective crap would be saying, well, yeah, you don't clone the ugliest. That's stupid. But in theory, it doesn't make any difference if that perception of ugly is just something you have, and that you're just as capable of seeing that as not ugly. But that's when we get into this problem, because there are some things, like the color red. You don't make a red gun. And there's certain kinds of ugliness you don't make, because they are intrinsically tainted, and they will always be tainted by their natural associations, by associations you can't change. You can't make, you can't separate them from. It's like the difference between like something that's a square and something that's a circle. Those are nice and easy. So those are safe bets. And then there's unsafe bets, where you start putting some extra bumps on things. And it just clearly thinks, you say, well, if you don't need the extra bumps, if there's no necessity to put them there, why add them? Yes, you can make them likable, but why bother? And why bother gets to the whole point of the conversation, is why bother creating these biological organisms, addicted, vulnerable, On top of it, they have to use their intelligence to try and navigate some personal interest in the context of having this danger, this capacity to ruin somebody else's existence, to gain your own advantage, to destroy and make a horrible mess. Why all this? Why bother making that kind of mess? Because that's all it's going to be, is a struggle. You're always going to be fighting its tendency to go bad on you, because it's not simple like a square or simple like a circle. The idea of creating these complex organisms means that they will complexify their existence. It's delicate. They're not simple. They don't just roll. It's a more complicated to get them from here to there. So why bother making something so overdone when all it's seeking is some sense of everything's okay. I feel fine. The air's breathable. It's too cold in here, but I'll pretend it's warm enough. And, oh yeah, it's just fine. Everything's just fine. Everything's just great. So all of this trouble just to have this feeling of, yeah, everything's fine. No worries. And like I said, in our current context, you can't have no worries. You look at the world and there's just no way not to worry. You look at your future. You look at your prospects. Just paying the bills, blah, blah, blah. There's plenty to worry about. So you have very little likelihood of achieving much of this no worries bullshit. Because there's all kinds of shit that's, the roof needs replacing and this has to be done. All of this stuff, is piling up, and it's going to require your devotion. And you're going to have to move from your, oh, everything's fine, I'm comfortable, everything's great, to some circumstance where you're not going to be fine, everything's great. You're going to be miserable. Why make that? Why throw somebody in that circumstance? Stupid. But anyway, I'll be back. Interesting. Interesting. So what it should be interesting is, again, recognizing that we are in a war against a lot of bad trends. Things are heading south. They're sliding down. And it doesn't even seem like you can get people to understand any kind of grabbing impulse. Like, don't let it do that. Don't let it fall over. There's just no rational reflex to this dilemma. Because I don't think anybody could sit there and say, this is the best of times, right? I mean, it's just not. But anyway, I'd be back. Probably. Back. Maybe not for long, but we'll see how it goes. Anyway, so I was looking at that picture. A little blue one. Knots. You could think of it's just untying knots. So civilizations get knotted by bad habits, broken routines, letting prisoners vote or some other kind of bullshit. Any asshole. But anyway, not having mechanisms that are going to tend to do the right thing. Create a mechanism that makes the filters for good stuff and sinks the bad stuff. Floats the good stuff, sinks the bad stuff. And so he ends up in knots, and it solves the job of people like me to show up and say, well, I've got to untie the knot. And how do you untie a knot? So it's nobody's professional at it. I'm not. So you just sit there and say, well, this one looks like it. If I pull on this one will... But there's a certain science to untying knots. You pull the wrong strings and loosen the wrong part, and you don't get anywhere. Yeah, I kind of have to know how the knot was put together to have any hope of taking it apart. How the mess was made and what mechanisms make messes. To understand this whole human psychology thing and being able to communicate with people and understand how how hard to pull, how soft to pull. It's all part of the process of being good at it. So I'd say I'm sort of a failure in a lot of respects, in the sense that I don't have any knowledge of the science of it, and I'm just doing the best I can with whatever resource I have to do it with. That's it's still such a stupid excuse. The best I can. Well, it's this whole script reading thing. You can't really break the idea until you can know you're doing something overtly wrong. And so until something looks like it's overtly wrong or a bad plan, it's hard to fix that. Now, little things like my language and some of my personality, flaws, I can know that's just getting in the way, and I should try to do something about that. I'm pretty sure that's probably correct, but pretty sure, it's not good enough. I have to be more sure to sacrifice the ease and comfort of just saying fuck it, literally saying fuck it, instead of phooey on that, shucks, God darn it, but anyway, that's just a tiny part of the subject of how to best approach the process of deorganizing the chaos. Is, in a sense, the chaos, once it's a knot, it's pretty organized. So anyway, it's just saying that applying the best strategy to fixing what needs fixing is the tricky part. So you could argue sort of that there's, the world is sort of turned into two kinds of things, really dumb people and really privileged people. So you have two kinds of tightrope walkers. The kind who always work with a net, they can't, real failure is out of the picture. I mean, yeah, they could go to jail for something, but I mean, even that, they know if they have enough celebrity status, that won't even happen. They'll be immune to even that. And then you got these other people who just couldn't care less. They can watch everybody falling off the tightrope in front of them and behind them, and they just say, well, that's just, they're stupid, they're jerks, who cares, whatever, it's not me. I don't even know if they think that far. The huddled masses, the creepy poor people of the world, they're just caught up in their ego thingy, trying to rise above the shit they're in, and they're just so busy doing that in a selfish way that they don't even contemplate the implications of what they're doing to the next tightrope walker. I mean, they'll jiggle on the rope, they'll take a poo right on the tightrope, and somebody else is going to have to step over their poo. They just don't have any knowledge of their the significance of what's taking place, and not that the privileged do, but they do in the sense that I can hire it done. I can hire somebody to clean that mess up before I walk on it, so I don't have to worry about the tightrope being unwalkable for the future, or for this or for that, because I can always buy a solution. And a lot of them have gotten there through no merit of their own. Like, they didn't have to earn it in any way. They just inherit it, fall into their privilege position of not having to worry about anything, not having to be paranoid about every step they take, because they're not going to fall on the daggers below. And so then you have the people in the middle who are just trying to get by, and they're the ones who understand the risk. They understand, oh yeah, I'm vulnerable here. I got to walk carefully and slowly and cautiously. And so then they're watching all these rich people fly right past them, all these privileged people, because they got a net. They can do all kinds of tricks. They can jump and hop, and they can read poetry, Shakespeare. They can do all kinds of shit while they're on the tightrope. Where the guy in the middle, he can't do any of that shit, and he's not dumb enough to think there's some purpose, there's some necessity to even walking the damn thing. And so the world's these two imbeciles are the ones that are breeding. The rich, the privileged, and the squalor. And everybody in the middle is way too cautious, way too afraid, because they know it's a mess. They can see it's a mess. Obviously, there's people who are, technically intelligent, but still really stupid when it comes to, realizing that, oh yeah, I've just been lucky. See, because that's a circumstance. You can realize you just got through it by luck. You had a good circumstances. And I'm always aware of that from my perspective, just because I know how reckless I was in my youth, and I certainly can see how all of that stuff was terrible. Those were horrible calculations. I was heading for make a mess, not heading for fix something, in a lot of ways. And I was lucky. So it was like speeding on curves or something. I was always cutting the corner. When you're on the inside track, you go too wide, and when you're on the outside track, you go too in. And it's just like I was never unlucky enough to meet another guy doing the same bullshit I was doing. And I know that. I mean, that's just one little aspect of what I'm trying to talk about, is in terms of how you get through by luck. And that's another class of asshole in the world. Somebody who's deluded and thinks this tightrope walking thing is a breeze. Well, it's only a breeze because you were lucky. You did a trick. It's like I could give some 90-year-old lady in Alabama or something, I can give her a putt or a golf club, and I can give her a 40-foot putt to make, and there's a chance she's going to just hit it and it goes in the freaking hole. Okay, but it's a slim chance. And so people have no appreciation for how privileged they were, in the sense that they were lucky. They drew the right tickets. They were pulling out of a hat full of skull and crossbone, and they got all jelly beans or whatever. And that they should have some appreciation. That's not what life is, and that's not what you're sentencing your children to, and that's not what you're sentencing their children to, or their children, and so on and so on. But you're not giving them this privileged position of being lucky. They're going to have to, their odds are against them, in the sense that you've already used up the luck. You've already used up win on the slot machine, and you're basically just saying, after you've won, you're putting your kid in the seat and saying, now you pull the lever. What do you think is going to happen? What do you think the odds are it's going to pay off again and again and again? You know that the odds are the machine isn't going to do that. So you haven't put anybody in any improved condition, because they're not living in the world of your luck. They're living in the world of their luck. Not exactly where I intended to go with this, but that's where I ended up going. But anyway, so back to this, the duality or whatever it is. That's a better knot picture there. So the knot is made by a process, and it can be unmade by a process. And I would argue that the process is the conversation. Certainly the conversation needs to happen not with other people that are already anti-natalist in their behavior. I mean, I don't need to convince people who are already underbreeding. And clearly the argument is the real menace is the poor, ignorant masses who aren't getting it, who think they're winning while they're having 6 kids. In a world where what's the odds of them all getting good jobs and having a nice life? Not very high, by international statistics. So and then the whole point of the world coming to there's lots of unsustainable events taking place, and this the whole world needs a wake-up call of saying, hey, slow down, at least pause, and then maybe hit the stop button, instead of the continue to play button. But pause first, pause. It's right here in front of us. Pause. Recognize that there's at least reason for pause. I mean, see, that's the conversation you have to have with the intelligent people, the people that can reason a little bit. You just say to them, look, there's cause to be concerned, and there's cause to pause. Yeah, so I'll put it in Johnny Cochranisms. There's cause to pause. Yeah. And see, if there is any way out of what seems like the animalistic nature is going to win, and you give it all to the idiocracy, the hungry cows, and the hungry cows are going to eat all the grass, and there won't be any grass tomorrow. So that's sort of what you're looking at. And so even for that reason alone, they could understand that, yes, civilization is not in rising. It's going to sink because it's fat. It's not, it's not lean and mean. It's becoming fat and stupid and lazy and retarded. It's going the wrong way. So I mean, it's all this, it all comes down to every one of these words has to be somehow measured and controlled, and everything has to be done in some thoughtful way to untie this knot. And the best strategy is this, one that complies with all these rules, of the circumstance, of creating the virus of caution and fear and apprehension and worry for the future, and a recognition that we've never been very responsible parents, the human race. Every generation doesn't seem to be looking out for the next generation. By all statistical data, it seems like they just say, what's in it for me? And, they somehow want the future to be their slave, and essentially have made it that way through the obvious function of all this deficit spending and all this other bullshit. It's like they've maxed out all these credit cards and they're just shoving them in their kids' pockets. Like that makes sense somehow. Like that's going to work. Pile on the debt before they even take their first breath. I mean, these are all good reasoning arguments, good talking points, I suppose. But again, the ones we have to talk to are people that are preoccupied playing video games right now, or, look, pretty color, sparkly, I mean, they're so fucking dumb. And they're so arrogantly retarded. I'm a very good driver. It's a hard conversation to have. Hard to even get in their face, because I don't know. Just trying to think of some crude way to generically insult what is now the average human, the average dumbass, millennial, whatever they're called. But why bother? But yes, they don't seem to be demanding much from the world or from themselves in terms of having any competence. I mean, it's scary to think that who becomes doctors now? What kind of moron? I mean, how do they even get through it? I mean, I've seen people with master's degrees who are just complete imbeciles. That there's a fix in somehow, because there's no way. I mean, they lack so little knowledge of just basic common sense, even stuff that you just couldn't pass you couldn't get through an SAT test. I mean, you're just saying, how did they ever get into college? Because they don't even know what I learned in grammar school. So something's fucked up. I mean, it's just obvious. It's like the bullshit with getting stuff from China. You can buy stuff from China, and you can buy it for less than it costs you to mail a postcard in America. So it's not only that it doesn't make any sense, but this whole idea that the stuff can be shipped from China for less than it cost me to send a postcard. And you're just saying, well, what the hell? How did the post office make a deal with China where they can mail anything they want, cheap as fuck, but you can't mail anything in America? How did that happen? How did that deal get made? And how does it remain a deal right after this guy who's supposed to make all these much better deals? How come he didn't fix that deal? Because that seems like a huge subsidy to China, right? I mean, it's kind of obvious. Force them to import the stuff and sell it here then, or something. You know what I mean? I mean, just something that would in some way not just be a direct payment to China. We get stuff cheap this way, but I don't know if it's efficient, frankly. And the post office can't handle mail and delivering my mail. So they can deliver mail from China, but they can't put the right mail in my box. And for a week, I put a sign out to try to mail a letter. A week. It took them a week to take a letter out of my mailbox, even though I had a red ribbon hanging out of the box and a sign, please take mail. They still didn't do it. I mean, it's not good signs. Anyway, I mean, that's just, personal anecdotal crap. Maybe all the postal employees are getting so terribly efficient, but I ain't seeing it here. So anyway, but the Chinese mail's making it. Funny. Ironic. Something like that. Pause again. I'll be back. Yeah, it should be a final segment or something like that anyway. Back again. So I was looking at that little fishy thing in the middle there. Just as I was thinking about being able to recognize what the thing really is. So that's part of what chaos does. Is chaos, not only does it trap you in a whirlwind where you can only deal with the stuff in front of you, and you can't see the big picture of the chaos. What's the chaos really doing? And so it's kind of hard to untie the knot from one locality, from the outside in. Kind of have to know what's on the inside a little bit. But the idea, what's the knot anyway? What is it really doing? What's the function? And the idea is you can take something that's, just like that looks like a skeleton of some deep water fish or something. That, under the color and the prettiness of it, or the symmetry of something like a tiger, is just a bug. It's a bug in tiger fur, in terms of, how it's sniffing through the environment and looking for its thing to pounce and all that kind of crap. And it's only because of the fact that you've artistically taken some essence out of it, and taken away some of its sinisterness, like this little skeleton picture down there, right? It's supposed to be ominous, but in a sense it's pretty. So it takes away, all the badness of it is kind of, the edge of it is taken away because of the fact that it does have pleasing aspects of symmetry and color. And so seeing life for what it really is, this struggle, this idea that you start off, with nothing, so to speak, and you build yourself into something, and then it's all taken away. I mean, all your power, your strength is slowly whittled away until you're kind of begging to be free of it, to be released from the burden of it. It's a kind of an insidious game to be playing. If you were to draw a picture of that kind of monster, where it gives you everything and then takes it all away, it wouldn't be a pleasant picture. But again, you can fix anything and see a chaos with a little heart. See, they call that complexity, but there's no complexity in the sense that there's no function. It's a knot in the shape of a heart. So you're disguising the fact that that's all it is, and that's what people have done to life. They've, decided that because it's complex, because it has different form and shape and because it's all doing different little games, it's all playing, and it's all a little busy, that it's all this kind of pleasant colors, and and we can just put it in some kind of pleasant envelope and just say it's a circle of something or other, and it's blah blah blah, and it's pretty, and that's all that matters for the moment. But what it really is something ominous and dangerous. I guess that's the key word, is the danger of it. You just don't see the victims here. You don't see the cancer tumors anywhere. You don't see the product of the chaos, which is, in our circumstance, the complexity, the chaos, the game is fail. I mean, that's the nature of the game, is a ton of this swirly stuff, so one little thread pops out and wins. The massive little sperms swimming up the stream, and they're all destined for failure. They're all doing all this work to accomplish nothing. Maybe a quarter of them might be able to say, well, I paved the way for the guy who does get there, so he's the the sacrificed himself for the cause. So that's what people do. They write some fake story about, well, it's not my life, it's about the great future I've given my children, or they'll write some bullshit story that doesn't have anything to do with what actually took place. All this little fractal stuff, there's all people pretty, it has nothing to do with understanding that in a sense we are fractals of a bad plan. We're just the bad plan on the bad plan on the bad plan on the bad plan. We're just built on the same bad notions of strive and win, the same fight for it. That impulse, just owns people. It owns, obviously, the winners. The losers are the ones that just say, fuck it, run away, get depressed and die. And clearly they have to keep re-arguing that case. So it's like this idea that, people say, ignorant people, of course, that, anti-natalism is doomed to failure because you'll all die out. Like it's a genetic code, when it's obviously an idea. And all the people who possess it don't possess it because they were given to it by their parents, obviously. I mean, obviously their parents didn't give it to them. So it's, it makes no sense as an argument, but again, it gives people like the pretense that they've untied the knot and that they've solved the problem, because they've said something completely irrational, and it looks like it just looks enough like the way to do it, or the way to win, when it's just this whole snake thing. You're just destined to repeat the same nonsense, and so that's, again, so then my argument is, if you want to stop being destined to repeating, then one of this generation of anti-natalists has to be strong enough and competent enough to win the argument. And like I said, at least we have the advantage of building on what people do before us, and that's what the internet provides, in some sense, that you do have this ability to preserve and save for the next time. The part of the plan, part of your weapons, can be made out of the past, like Schopenhauer, or those kind of examples, writers of the past, or some help to the talkers of the future. One can hope. But again, it's just, that's a bad description of chaos. Nihilism is not the product of anything complex. So stupid. I mean, not to recognize that there's more than one swirly bit in this mess that we're living in. And again, it gets back to the whole point of recognizing that, because you're winning doesn't mean everybody else is. It doesn't mean that the failures aren't real and painful, and that you're basically endorsing, you're creating them, you're causing them by doing nothing to stop them. Pretty much. I mean, you can't just watch something and then say, I did nothing to prevent it. It's like too many people being somewhere. Somebody should raise their hands. Hey, there's too many of you on there. It's going to fall over. Boat's going to tip over. Something's going to happen. It's a consequence. You can't just watch it and do nothing. Whatever. It's all part of the message, is the context and what can mean something to people. And it just seems like, as much as I am cynical about the average person, and cynical in the sense that they're idiots, I think they can still understand the basic concept that it's not just about your future, and it's that we're playing a much bigger game than that. There's much higher stakes than your welfare. Millions and billions of lives will be impacted by what you do now. It's all part of the story, and you're part of the story whether you like it or not, and you're responsible for the story. Where it goes is you're going to play a role in that, and that's something everybody can understand. Nihilist or not, determinism or not, all that kind of crap, it doesn't have anything to do with freely willing yourself to be a different person. It just has to do with the fact that it happens to you, and some of it happens to you in a way that you can see. You can see the idea pop in your head. Well, he's right. My life's more complicated than just what's in it for me. Is what's in it for all the people I'm going to interact with, and every interaction has a meaning, and there's something real to it. I can make somebody's day good, or I can make their day bad. Now, obviously, I want to try to inhibit the bad people from succeeding, and I want to try to help the good people in succeeding. So yeah, I have an obligation to play a role in here somewhere. I mean, I can choose, in the sense that I can see, the two roads in front of me. I can see that there are two roads, and I can sit here and just accept that's the truth. Even though it's already determined which road I'm going to take, it's already written. I can see them, and you have to do it like in your own face. You have to be an asshole in your own face and say, well, I'm choosing my self-interest. And that's the part you have to do right in front of you. You have to read the bad script right in front of yourself. The denial script, the script that says it's all going to be all right. This bullshit that it can be all right by everybody doing nothing. That yes, our non-army will win the war. No, that's not going to happen. So anyway, oh God. People always use these analogies that, well, what's the difference between a nail in the eye and a stubbed toe, and blah, 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 stubbed toes are nothing, and I have some kind of problem with my damn toe. Like the toenail got pushed in or something. Oh, fuck, does it hurt? Anyway, little things like that, it's just like you don't already have enough of this. I don't feel good, or with all the stuff you have, and then you end up with some little extra bit, and it's just like, just part of the charming story. Pain. Ooh, the pain. It really is painful. Maybe there's some kind of nail in my shoe or something. What the fuck? Anyway, I'll worry about that later. Ow. I'm having trouble getting through the video. It hurts so much. It's fucking toe. Useless fucking toe. Toe I don't even need. We could definitely do with like a unitoe. These individual toes aren't very useful. I mean, another evolution argument, right? It's just so obviously like, what the fuck use are our toes? Ugh. I mean, damn. Clearly, that one time they were doing something more interesting than they're doing now. It seems clear that definitely I had ancestors who had more useful toes. So, moving on. Yeah, Minky. See, even that, they just turn everything into a silly, stupid-looking thing. Just everything's got to be turned into silly and stupid. Simplistic and stupid. Stupid, mostly. Alright, so anyway, till the next time. I mean, even this is stupid bullshit that people are entertained by. You know, skiing and surfing and all this other. You're just like, yes, you could just kick that right out of existence and you'd never miss it. You know, so many things people are preoccupied by that just mean so little, so little. Untying knots is the only game worth playing. But anyway, till the next time, such probably enough. Most definitely enough, I think. There's kind of an anti-natalist image there. That's whatever his name is, Timmy or whatever the fuck his name is. What the hell is his name? I should be able to remember. Hey, I haven't watched South Park in like 700 years. Can't remember his name. Well, anyway, he's like the loser. I mean, he's not as big a loser as Kenny. Kenny always lost big. Yeah, it was kind of sad when they stopped killing Kenny, you know. But anyway, you know, little changes that you're just like, why did they make that change? But anyway, till the next time, such, so forth and whatnot. Yeah, I'm done. Okay. And so, see ya.